Hello, I'm Karem Simon, Chair of the Department of Music at the University of Prince Edward Island. Welcome to this episode of our distinguished UPEI Music Alumni series. Throughout this series of podcasts, we invite our music alumni to share their music and professional journeys. In so doing, we look to our students' past as a means of informing and perhaps inspiring our current students. Today's guest is baritone, class of 2010 alumnus, Nathan Keoughan. This podcast is being recorded in February of 2022. I am in Charlottetown and Nathan is participating from his home in Toronto. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you so much for having me. This is my first official podcast.
There you go. Good. Let's get going here, Nathan. And could you speak about your childhood and music-related experiences?
Sure. I had quite a musical upbringing. I'm from a pretty traditional rural Prince Edward Island family, and my family is very into Celtic music. So everyone in my family, cousins, aunts, and uncles, are fiddle players, guitar players. My dad and all of my aunts are all singers. And so I grew up with almost every event I would have ever gone to. We would have been lugging guitars and amps and that kind of thing. And so I always grew up being in the musical family. And so or at least in my small world in Fort Augustus, we were the musical family. And so I had always kind of known early on that I was supposed to maybe be good at it. But as we went on, as I grew up, I took piano. I didn't really have great attention span for it. At Stone Park, my mom was very wise, and she didn't want us to stay in the country. She really pushed for us to go to Stone Park so we could take band, because she thought that would be really important in our upbringing. And thank God she did. I went to Stone Park. I played clarinet. I was amazing for about 6 months on clarinet. Yeah. And then I switched to saxophone, and I played saxophone through high school, even in UPEI a little bit. Okay. Not for you, but for the jazz band.
There you go. Good.
Yeah, I did. I was lucky enough to do the musicals at Charlottetown Rural and those kinds of things. So I felt like I was very lucky on PEI to always have an opportunity to be into music. And I also had a family where both my grandmother and both parents were always very supportive if we wanted to go into music. They didn't push us, but they were supportive if we come to it, which was incredible.
There you go. Nathan, I recall visiting Charlottetown Rural at one point, and I think I may have been just there to observe some student teachers. And I think it was during a lunch break, and I remember you singing some Beatles tunes with some of your friends, and I'm wondering if you could recall that for our audience.
Oh, wow. Okay. I actually thought you had maybe seen a different concert, but you were there at lunch that time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my group of friends in high school, we were all very into music. We were all in bands, and Mr. McCready, Ali McCready, was very supportive and very encouraging to us to play, to make our own ensembles, and to get out and perform. And so I remember just asking Miss Willis, the principal, if we could perform at lunch, because we wanted to play. I think we were playing at the ECMAs or something like that too. But my first concert there, Mr. McCready encouraged us to get on stage for a band fundraiser, and I sang "Hey Jude," and that was my first performance ever. Like, it was around 2005, fundraising for a trip to New York.
Right.
And I remember that kind of being life-changing. I had never really performed before in front of people as a singer, because my dad and my aunts and everyone in my family sang. I didn't really want to when I was growing up, and that was kind of the moment where I decided to do it. And I remember after I performed, I said to myself, "Oh, this is invigorating. I need to keep doing this." And actually, Stephen and Sungha were at that concert because I was going to school with Tina, Christina Bowie. And they, after that concert, they came up to me and they said, you're going to come and join our UPEI choir because they were going on a trip to Nova Scotia. Anyways, they didn't scout me, but they certainly came after me.
Good. Okay, so then why after high school did you choose UPEI? Perhaps the
Well,
influence of
it was
Sungha and Stephen at this
it
time?
really was Stephen and Sungha, like it was so safe with them. And I had, at that point, like in grade 11, just opened my mouth to sing. So I had nothing underneath me. I had like the dream of being a singer, but not enough of the personality, not enough of I just wasn't ready to launch. I wasn't ready to leave PEI. And UPEI was like the perfect place for me. I mean, I had a ride to school because my dad works there, but
Okay, there you go.
but
Didn't know
but
that?
it really was just it felt very safe and I kind of thought I was going to go there for a year or two, but after the first 2 weeks or so, I actually had the intentions of kind of shifting to theater, but I got there and started to kind of listen to classical music and I just kind of became engulfed with singing. And I remember YouTube at the time had just really started to be a thing, and there were a lot of illegal recordings that I listened to like obsessively. And I remember thinking that or feeling that like because I listened to it, I felt like I was a little like I had a bit more of a grasp on it. Not all of my colleagues listen to classical music.
I
And,
understand.
and, and I really was like, no, I think listening is the key.
Good.
But there was a shift there within the first 3 weeks at UPI that I went, no, I want to be in classical music.
Good. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about your focus while you were a student at UPEI, and just what about the UPEI music experience resonated with you?
Well, yeah, like I said, I really had hoped to come in and I wanted to have some sort of singing foundation underneath me. And I thought maybe I would go to a musical theater school, but my mother had said an education would be best. And at the time you couldn't get a degree from the musical theater places, where I think you can now. But it was really just kind of a perfect perfect opportunity for me to get into something safely. And then when I was there, I really dove into opera. I wasn't allowed to sing it so much, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do. Mind you, I was a bass at the time, and I think because I was a bass, there was a bit more of a niche in opera, and so I had to almost change my thinking around it. But I remember some of my first classes with various professors, people I'd sing a note or whatever, and they'd go, "Oh yeah, no, you know exactly where you're gonna go," and they encouraged me to follow the classical route because I don't. Growing up in PEI, you don't really have that. Like you're not exposed to opera all the time, and so I really had to study it on my own. And Stephen Sondheim just kind of allowed for such a safe environment for me to either love it or to just kind of do it casually. And as soon as they noticed that I had a passion for it, they fueled the passion and they drew it out of me. But it wasn't maybe until my third year at UPEI where I kind of started to feel things shift. I had kind of started to I had more friends, all of my like having the crowd at UPEI kind of support you, a whole community of people who fit in various ways, but maybe not in the ways that you'd expect. A bunch of band geeks, really.
Yeah. Okay. So Nathan, Sungha and Stephen have been just so good at developing the voice studio at UPEI, and you are not the first student to have come to UPEI with the intention, I'm just going to stay a year or two and then I'm going to go somewhere else. And you end up just blossoming in terms of your musical development while you're with us, and then you remain. So a few things. You mentioned you were surrounded by this group of people. So who were among your classmates while you were a student, or people who modeled good musicianship?
Well, it's so funny because it changed as my 4 years went on. When I got there, I was such like a sponge, and there were such big personalities. And I remember Jacques Arsenault and Danielle Lynch and Maria Campbell
Oh yes.
in the common area, and just I was just enthralled with their energy and their storytelling and their everything. And I thankfully they didn't adopt me as like into the group, but they were super supportive colleagues, and we Jacques and I and a group of us formed the Tech in my first year,
That's right. Yeah.
and which was like not we didn't let any of the professors touch it. We wanted to be our own special musical thing, and I really do think that formed a type of musicianship that I don't know if I would have gotten if I had to have taken class.
Yeah, in Maria and Jacques and Dana Lee, very good people, very good musicians. So associating with them,
such magnetic spirits too, like energy.
there you go.
But
Good.
but then as I grew, like in my later years, I had a whole other group of supportive friends who are still my group of friends now. Like there's of course Brittany Banks and Andrew Murray, Thane Campbell, Phil Cromer. They're my close friends now, and we still during the pandemic we play trivia I think once a month at least. But my still core group of friends, like the people who will be in my wedding party and that kind of thing, they're for the most part UPEI music students for sure.
There you go. Okay, and terrific people, terrific musicians to associate yourself with. So who among the professors at UPEI mentored you? You mentioned Sungha, you mentioned Stephen. Were there others?
Well, there were others, but what I have to say, because I think my experience with the voice studio was maybe it's not that unique now. I mean, I think there's been a few, it's repeated since then a bit, but I had Stephen as my teacher. He taught me all of my technique. He taught me all of my foundational vocal production, taught me how to be a person half the time too. Somehow ended up being working slightly different. She wasn't necessarily my voice teacher, even though she did teach me voice through choir and through all those kinds of things. I went to Sungha in my 4th year because they knew that I needed a bit more attention. Like I do have a bit of ADHD, and so they did really kind of know that they had to support me in a different way. And because we didn't have a vocal coach there, Sungha decided to be my vocal coach too. And so they, in tandem, brought me up to where I needed to be just to get into my master's. And so there was about a year and a half there where they just like really, really, really focused on me. But the other professor, who I don't know how I would do what I do now without her, because I still opened scores. I was not very musically literate like most singers really, when I got there. And because I had a really good ear, if my ear played out, and also because it's a physical instrument, you don't really need to know how to finger the notes in the same way. But it was June Countryman, Dr. June Countryman, who she started, I think her first day was my first day, and she came in and she had this whole new style of teaching. She taught us rhythm in Takadimi, which like I now can look at any rhythm in any meter, and I will know how to read it very, very easily. It's not to mention solfege and all those kinds of things, but I do not think I could sing the contemporary music that I sing now. I don't think I would be able to learn it at the rate that you have to if I did not have that sight singing course, and if I did not have Stephen and Sung Ha in the background. And also Sung Ha really taught me how to conduct and that kind of thing. With I did a choral class with her too. But there was another professor that I learned how to.
Okay, well, before we get to any other professors, I just want to say that the foundation of June Countryman's pedagogy, it's all based on music literacy. She's all about that, and clearly that resonated with you.
Well, like I said, I was truly not musically literate. Like my family, though there were a pile of musicians, we're not particularly musically literate. When we learned to play piano, we learned, but I remember in high school, Ali McCready at one point ripping a saxophone out of my hand and playing me the solo that I was supposed to be playing because he was frustrated that I wouldn't read the notes, I would only hear it. And he played it for me and he handed it back and said, now play it. And I said, did it? And I played it perfectly. And he said, you're gonna have to figure out how to learn music. And he did that in front of everybody, which sounds terrible, but for me is exactly what I need.
Okay, there you go. Now, you mentioned Jacques Arsenault a moment ago and Brittany Banks, and those two very fine singers happen to participate in the UPEI Wind Symphony as percussionists. And I invited you to do the same. And could you speak to that? And I would also like you to speak about your role as narrator in our rendition of Casey at the Bat.
Well, I have to say, there was a period of time in about third year where I remember two professors in particular starting to stop me and talk to me in the hallway. And I remember at that point feeling like something was shifting, like maybe I fit my pants better, or I don't know what it was. I just but I remember Dr. Francis Gray and you suddenly paying attention to me in a way, and I remember it kind of giving me a bit of a boost. And one day you pulled me into the office and you said, would you be interested in doing this Casey at the Bat piece? And we listened to it, you showed it to me, and I was on cloud nine for months, because it's not very often anyone gets any feature at the Wind Symphony. You really have to be quite a diligent student, and I don't think I was. But looking back on it now, just being in the percussion section, as a singer now that I am in front of an orchestra at all times, not all times, I wish it was all times, but I'm in front of an orchestra, I have an understanding of what's happening back there that I actually don't think the majority of singers do. Yeah. And I really have to thank you for giving me that opportunity, because when as a singer, have to count 68 bars of rest ever. That in itself taught me how to count. And but Casey at the Bat was a huge shift for me. We toured that a little bit. We did that, I think, maybe in Holy Redeemer. We did that. We were supposed to do it somewhere else, but I think we got stormed.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
But that piece, it taught me how to follow an orchestra, how to follow a conductor, which really is maybe one of the hardest parts of my job, because you're with different conductors all the time. Sometimes they're from Italy, sometimes they're from this place. They don't have the same school. But being able to follow you and learning how to do that, and learning how my part fits in with that, was so valuable to me, because even now the shows that I do, there are huge sections of those shows that are orchestrated yelling, and it's not the same as singing, because singing, your notes, you have to stick to your notes, where shouting, sometimes you shout faster than you shouted the day before, or you read faster, or you whatever, and you have to listen so hard to the clarinet, to the this, you have to watch you. And I think that was the first time where anyone ever required me to do it. And I'm so thankful that I had the opportunity to do it, because after that, I was not that scared to be in front of a band after that.
Good. For those who are watching this interview, Nathan's performance of Casey at the Bat is on the Wind Symphony Solitary Dancer CD from 2009, and it's available on our Bandcamp page, so you should really check it out. A few years ago, when we ended up uploading all of the Wind Symphony CDs, I was going through things and listened to Casey at the Bat, and I just had to write Nathan at the time. And years later, the performance still drew me in. You did just a spectacular job with that, Nathan, and I'm very grateful to you. Let's move on. So your post UPEI study, you went to the New England Conservatory. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, New England was the place I decided to do my master's. My third or fourth year at UPEI really was kind of your fourth year. If you're doing your graduate things too, your fourth year is tough, because I was flying here and there, not doing anything cool, just doing auditions. But the place I landed on was New England, and it was because there was a wonderful teacher there, Michael Murrah, and he's Canadian baritone, and him and I just jived perfectly. But there was also a Canadian who ran the program, John Greer, at the time, and they accepted me in. They gave me quite a scholarship, though it was still, even with the scholarship, quite expensive to go to the States.
As I have a degree from Northwestern, I know how expensive it is.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
if it's not a state school, you're going to pay an
Yes.
awful lot, unless you're on
But
a
it was
scholarship.
but it was quite a shift from UPEI, because I had well, I mean, you walk in and there's orchestras everywhere. They had 5 orchestras. They have 3 tiers, and then they have 2 other philharmonics or whatever. And New England is one of the top string schools, and so it was just incredible to be in like a cool American city in Boston with all of this art and all of these things. And I mean, Prince of Rhode Island has lots of culture and art, but it was quite a shift. I also lived a block from Symphony Hall. I remember seeing James Levine every once in a while. But New England was incredible. I got to work with people like Stephen Lord was one of the conductors there at the time, and he really, really, really helped me through my transition after New England. Mm-hmm. I also got to work with an incredible baritone, Greer Grimsley. His wife ran part of the opera school there, Loretta Bybee, and they were wonderful, wonderful mentors, very supportive. Even still, there are people that check in whenever they see there's something going on, and they make sure to always give people what they need, because as a singer, they're both professional singers. They know how bizarre the world is, and when you're out there on your own and you're managing a show on your own in a city where you don't know anyone, those messages from those kinds of people are so helpful. But New England was wonderful for that. And then after that, I had a couple years in Toronto as kind of freelance, and it was kind of tough going to Toronto without being in an institution, because you didn't know as many people. But I had the opportunity to do Highlands Opera Studio, which is run by Valerie Quinca and Richard Markson. They're married, and they cast me in my first role ever, which was La Boheme. Mm-hmm. And Richard Marsden is Canadian royalty. And so it was lovely to have that. My first show was like, I was I think 21, and everyone else in the show was like closer to 30. And so I remember just kind of sitting there in awe and just having it was the first time I heard like singers, you know, like where your hair goes back, and when you're a little too close to them. And that was my first young artist program. Young artist programs are very important for singers. After school it's kind of hard to know what it is. It's all kind of institutionalized things where after undergrad, you then do a young artist program. You might have to pay for it, and then you do your master's, and then you do more young artist programs, and then you try to do professional young artist programs, which are like at companies. And at those places, you're there to cover roles, you're there to study and coach and to work on your craft, but you're also there to do smaller roles. So I spent a season in Calgary. In what year was that? 2015, I think. And that was incredible. We did school tours. We were doing 50 performances of the Magic Flute, all at 7 in the morning, which is just great training. You know, it's like, it's tough, but it's like, well, I have to sing no matter what, you know, and you kind of learn to get over your normal singer, like you have to sing it. So you just get up and you do it. Then after Calgary, I was lucky enough to get accepted at l'Atelier Lyrique with Opera Montréal, or Montreal. And that is really where I felt like I blossomed. It was the right timing, you know, with singers and with a lot of people. The timing has to work physically with your voice and your body. It has to work with the opportunities. Yeah, there has to be the right opportunities. And when I started at Montreal Opera, in my first week, they gave me even the job that still is paying the bills. And that was, they gave me a workshop of a show called The Wall. And it really was just the fact that these people were trusting me, and my voice had just shifted at I think I was 28 when I started. And so at 28, for a guy, your voice is now a little bit more settled. And they provided you with so much warmth and support, not so much expectation, but support. Like, and I find that those are two different things, expectation and
I understand. Okay, so Nathan, let's pivot right now to your professional career, seeing as you're talking about The Wall. And what I'll do, let's go to just some pictures, and I'm wondering if you could, what role are you playing here, Nathan?
This is just a couple of years ago, I think 2019. I'm singing the role Leo Stein from the show 27. It's based on the story of Gertrude Stein and 27 Rue de Fleurus, kind of the the story of the arts culture in Paris. Like I'm Leo Stein, the guy in behind me is actually Pablo Picasso, and a model. But that was a wonderful show by Ricky Ian Gordon and Royce Vavrick. Ricky Ian Gordon is a wonderful composer from New York, opera composer. He's done other things like Grapes of Wrath. And Royce, I have to say, is actually working on a piece with my partner right now. And he's a wonderful Canadian lyricist. Very, 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 two wonderful, brilliant artists in the world today.
Terrific. Let's move on. This role.
So this is from my time at Montreal Opera as well. This is when I was in the studio, the atelier. This is the role Sharone from Tosca. And that building in behind, I believe is the Vatican St. Peter's Basilica, and I think I'm standing on Castel Sant'Angelo. Tosca just jumped off the building.
Yeah. Okay. I know the opera.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, some great clarinet licks in it, by the way.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Okay, so you mentioned the wall. So we've got I think 3 photos from the wall. So could you speak to what's going on here and exactly the scope of your role in this production?
Yeah, well, this is a great picture. This is from Cincinnati, the production I did in Cincinnati in 2018. I can tell, but because my hair is a different color than some of the other productions. But what's happening in this scene right now, if anyone knows The Wall, the opera actually is called Another Brick in the Wall. And it is a show by, the music is by Julien Bilodeau, Canadian, Quebecois composer. And the words are Roger Waters. So it is Pink Floyd. It was produced by Montreal Opera as well as Pierre Dufault. And it's the production itself is a huge production. It's one of the most expensive shows they've ever done at Montreal Opera. $6 million show. And this is the trial scene. At the very end of the opera, the role kind of follows the rock star Pink through his kind of demise, his mental demise. You're kind of following him through reality as well as trips, as well as psychosis, and you're just seeing this person's ego kind of get crushed and go into himself. And you really the show, it's the album itself is that. The movie that they made is also that, and this is really it's one of the kind of richest characters I've ever played. And it's also maybe not maybe, it is the most ridiculous baritone role I think there's ever been created. I don't leave the stage. I sing, I think there's 27, 28 songs. I sing 22 of them.
Wow.
And so it's stamina-wise, it was quite life-changing. This was a big shift for me. And I like I said before, I workshopped it originally. And I was not the person they had hired to do it. It was written for a wonderful baritone, Etienne Dupuis. And he's very, very successful right now. In fact, because he's so successful, I got to do it after. So I covered it.
Very good.
I covered it in Montreal and like understudied it. And Etienne actually had a baby at the time. And so I had to step in for the rehearsals. And it was kind of through that I was then given the next production. And so it really kind of is a testament to being prepared and knowing your stuff because I really lucked out in this situation. It was quite a huge step stone for me. But what's happening right now, these are all birds. That's my wife and my mother, and they're all beside me, and they have all turned into birds. So that's you know.
There you go. Good. We have a couple of other photos of this production. Yeah. I think this here. What's happening here?
In this is the aria or the scene, Comfortably Numb. And that is, I'm watching my mother tend to my younger self while I'm having a fever. And if you know the words, I had a fever, my head feels just like 2 balloons. And this is kind of going back and forth. The original song is David Gilmour and Roger Waters singing back and forth. And so my colleague France there is singing David Gilmour's part, and I sing Roger Waters' part.
Yeah. Okay, good. And then this is
that's earlier in the show. That's Hey You. I think I'm just about to collapse on the ground there, I believe.
Good, terrific. Okay, so those are photos. Are there any other um, roles that you've had that you'd like to speak to right now?
Roles that I've had, well, in terms of career, I don't know if I mentioned it. I might have skipped over it. But one of the things that really was unique to me growing up was that while I was at UPEI, I was lucky enough to do the role of Roy Gardner in Annie Gilbert, and I did that for a number of seasons. And looking back on it, I didn't realize at the time what a gift it was to be singing 3 or 4 months in the summers, and then also studying opera in the winter. So I was working on stage with real Canadian acting legends like Martha Irving and Robin Craig and stuff like that. And so I had such a unique experience of like absorbing things on stage in the summers, and then in the winters being able to go to UPEI. And it was, I really think that balance of kind of living in both worlds was quite special. Although I do have to say now in my professional career, it is quite tough living in the middle, being somewhat crossover, because though I'm an opera singer, some opera people might think that I'm crossover, and theater people would think that I'm an opera singer. And so it's always a bit of a thing. Those worlds don't mix that much, but they should.
There you go. Nathan, as far as your professional career is concerned, I'm wondering if you could speak to two issues. Number one, as a singer, there are probably lots of ups and downs, with roles and not getting roles. And then these past 2 years, I'm sure you, like many other professional musicians, have had plenty of engagements canceled. So could you speak to both those issues?
Yeah, well, they're one prepares you for the other in a weird way. Rejection, I think, I had a it wasn't that tough, but to me it was tough after my master's was done. I was in Toronto, and I had quite a few years of not getting what I was hoping to get. I had quite a bit of rejection, and I thought it was because I was terrible, but in reality it was because I was 21. And but the fact that I had a few years of having to do serving jobs and having to do other jobs, it was good for me in a way. I ended up having to cultivate other skills and learn how to charm and all that kind of stuff, which really kind of helps later on in the career whenever you're expected to participate in philanthropic events and that kind of thing. But yeah, so that those few years of kind of ups and downs and rejection and not doing very much set me up in a better way for whenever I was then finally freelance after my young artist program days. So after I finished the atelier and those kinds of things, there then was another lull. And singers, all performers, I do think you have to learn to ride the roller coaster of the career, and your ego goes through ups and downs, and in the downs your ego is doing something different than it does in the ups, and having to manage those things and having to watch them, and also kind of you have to have some conversations with yourself about it just to keep yourself going or in the right headspace. Because when people fall out of that headspace and they think that everyone's against them and they're never going to get another gig again, it doesn't do anything for your career, and it can be tough. And I think COVID, because I had a few years like that, when COVID happened, it was really hard. It was the first time in my career that I had 2 years booked. I had 2 full years into the future booked, and money that I don't think I ever really had expected to be coming. And when I lost that, it was quite tough, because I had those jobs, I reached those jobs, I just didn't get to do them. And so for a long time during COVID, and even still, it's hard having to manage that and having to accept that, like, that was not my fault. That's just how the cookie crumbles. I do think because I had accepted that you have to ride the roller coaster a while ago, that I've been pretty resilient to it. And I have many colleagues and many close friends who have a harder time with it. And I think maybe because of my, I mean, I have a bit, most singers need a little delirious confidence in them, but because of that and because of my attitude towards the roller coaster, I really think I was able to be there with some of my colleagues and that kind of thing whenever they were feeling like they should have jumped ship. And there's nothing wrong with jumping ship. And in fact, it's not jumping ship. That's what it feels like when you're on the ship. But when you're off the ship, I'm sure it doesn't necessarily feel like that, because no matter what you do, like I said a few minutes ago, if you're serving, if you're doing anything, all of these jobs are going to fuel whatever else you're going to do. I never thought that being a server at an Italian restaurant would help my career, but it has. In many, many ways. I can also, I've had little jobs with Duncan McIntosh at Montgomery Theatre and those kinds of things. And there's so many little things that I've done that I have to do just to make ends meet that have made me more well-rounded. And if I was to only ever do the singing thing, I don't think I'd end up being as well equipped. And so you have to roll with the punches, and you have to kind of accept things. And there's an improv lesson, a theater game that we play that's called Yes Let's, and it's you kind of have to always say yes let's when you're on stage. If you're on stage with someone and their attitude is not yes let's, they're not a good colleague. You have to move and they hold you. It can be very tough, and I think that yes let's game is really important to your attitude and your career, your ego, and all those things. Sometimes I have to remind myself not to get in my way and to yes let's it, and it can be helpful.
Okay, I understand that. Okay, let's pivot elsewhere. What projects are you currently working on?
This is no one's favorite question. I'm excited to come back to Charlottetown in a month or two to do Beethoven 9. And I'm excited to do that. It was supposed to happen a while ago, and thankfully Prince Edward Island or PEI Symphony has been one of the few symphonies in the country to reschedule what they were going to do beforehand. And so I'm very excited to come back and do that with some wonderful colleagues, with Hannah O'Donnell, Rolvaga O'Donnell, with Tracy Canton. Yeah, that's gonna be fun. There's a few other things that I wish I could announce, but I probably still have to wait a little bit before I can say it. But
I understand that. So
yeah.
So how about are there any roles in the discipline that you really covet and you hope you get an opportunity to immerse yourself in at some point?
Oh, absolutely. I have always wanted to sing Scarpia from Tosca. Scarpia is the chief. He's the basically a police officer. He's a bit of a henchman and or a bad guy. And he's just this evil, such a wonderful evil character. You need quite a snarl in your voice, and I've been practicing. And so that's something that I've always wanted to sing. My voice has transitioned a number of times. Like I have gone through, I was a bass, and then I was a bass baritone, and now I'm a baritone. And even now, people still think that I could be other things. They have to relax. But yeah. So as time goes on, there are things now that I could sing that I never thought I would be able to. And so as time goes on, there's a few other things that I'd like to do. I've always wanted to sing Wotan, but I think now my voice might be too high for it. So Rigoletto is another one. Like anything Verdi, I'm really looking forward to that. I hope to grow into be like a Verdi baritone, and which it looks like it might go that way. You kind of need to be able to sing high and bright and squealy, and hopefully hopefully that'll happen at some point. I sing all these things at home. Thankfully, I don't have anyone to report to anymore, so I don't get in trouble about it. But
Very good. Very good. So, as we bring our conversation to conclusion here, Nathan, I'm just wondering, what message would you have for our current students?
There's so many things. I feel like I have too many things to say, and maybe none of them are that good. But but besides the ego thing, I do think you have to learn to ride that roller coaster. But I do think it's really important to surround yourself with people who believe in you, and I mean both friends, but you have to have, as a singer, you have to have a voice teacher who you trust. You have to have a coach who you trust. You have to have these people who, if when things come up, you can go to and you can ask. And when you don't have that, it can be really tough to know where to turn next, or if this idea, if these things are good.
Having a supportive community and network on which you can draw is an important thing, particularly as a freelance artist like yourself. And that message from our conversation today has certainly emerged.
Yeah, and I was also going to say, it's as a singer, I think talking about ego and that kind of thing, it's we have this word diva, and it's such a weapon thing, and sometimes it's used by professors that don't sing at all, and
Exactly.
and I think it's weaponized, and it's not. I never understood what a diva was for a long time. I knew what it looked like, but I never had much experience with, like, I personally, every day, quite a diva. But the true sense of the diva, someone who is trying, like a regular person who's dealing with unrealistic expectations. I think there's kind of something there where now I always hope to be the best colleague and to be the nicest person, especially if you're on the top of the call list. If you're the person who's singing the lead role, you really are the leader in that situation, and you really are supposed to be as positive and nice as possible. And I really try so hard. And I think the reason I try so hard is because when I slip up and I am frustrated, it provides for a bit of grace. And I don't think anyone should be a diva, but there's a world in which it exists, and it's not that weapon version that you use against the singer who you don't like. It's a real thing, and I now have sympathy for it, and I just think it's what happens when people are just trying to deal with the expectations that are on them, and I think everyone should have a little bit of it in them, but it's about having those conversations with your ego and knowing that, okay, that is not me, that is the stress I'm under, that is not whatever. And I think if you're going to be a singer, you do have to learn to balance those things, and it can be tough. But I know singers always get kind of put into one category, and it's because most of them are, maybe we're all like me, we all have ADHD, and we're all a bit energetic, but have a hard time focusing is my issue.
There you go. Okay,
but I do think there's some understanding that should be there. And I think if anyone's ever a diva, it's okay. You just have to then ask yourself, well, what's happening there? Maybe I should be better.
Terrific. So, Nathan, thank you so much for sharing your career to this point. As an emerging artist on the Canadian and international stage, we wish you well as opportunities to showcase your wonderful artistry develop. So, on behalf of the UPEI music community, please accept our best wishes for your continued professional success and personal happiness. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So here I am with Nathan again, and in our post conversation after what everyone just saw, Nathan happened to bring up the issue of the importance of a vocal coach. And many of you may have watched my conversation with Nicole Bellamy. So, Nathan, could you speak to the importance of a vocal coach and your experiences?
Well, I was just saying how wonderful it is that now Nicole Bellamy is on Prince Edward Island, and now you can have a coach in there. But for me and for all singers, after school or even during your master's, you have a coach. But at my young artist programs, I did not work with a voice teacher all the time. You work with coaches all of the time. So in a week, I might have 7 coachings and I would have maybe a voice lesson. And so once at a certain point, coaches really are what keep you honest, and no one really would ever be teaching me a note, but they certainly would be correcting notes for me. But they are people that they're your ears, because as a singer, you're busy doing other things. You don't have, if you're listening, you're probably not a very good singer. And so you have to have a coach there to tell you, okay, this is working, this is not working. Because as a singer, you're only really going by feeling. You're told not to listen. And a coach is there to be those ears for you. And so I spend way more time with coaches, and I spend time with coaches who break me down and make me feel like and they make me question my musical abilities for sure. And because if I didn't do that, I don't know if I would be prepared enough for a first rehearsal. Because in opera, you're never nervous about your opening night. You're nervous about your first rehearsal. And a coach is about getting you to the level of like not proficient, but like incredibly, like no questions at all for your first rehearsal. It is not the same as in theater. You can show up and not necessarily know your music. In opera, you have to be off book, and a coach is your lifeline. Absolutely.
Terrific. An important thing for all singers to know. Thanks for this addendum to our conversation, Nathan. Bye-bye.
Thank you.